Good morning. It's Stacy Harding and Al Colleen with another episode of Fourth Level Conversations. Al, it is awesome to be with you once again. We're going to have an interesting conversation today, I think.
We are, and apology to anyone who ever bothers to watch these. It's been a while since we've done one because of the holidays and all, but I'm glad we're back on track. And as we started this morning, we both had some experiences. Yours have been longer and more profound. Mine have been short term this morning. But what I mentioned to let folks in on how we began our conversation and what our podcast will be about today is something as small as a low tire warning on your car. I go out to check my car out because my wife says I have a low tire warning. I check all the tires, they're all fine. And I have a Toyota 4Runner, so you have to go underneath to get the full size spare, and it also has a sensor. I'm trying to crank and nothing's happening. I look under there, it's gone.
Yeah.
And this thing is like secured to the car. No one ever knows it's there. Hell, I wouldn't know it's there if I wouldn't check the thing. And it's like, God, it couldn't have fallen off going down, da da da. And so is one of those moments in life we get with these small surprises and sometimes big surprises. And what I realized is I'm at a crossroads when I notice that this tire is gone, and my ego mind, my level 3 mind, goes down the track of, well, where'd it go, who stole it, how much it's going to cost, what a pain in the butt. I got calls with folks, I've got things to do, I don't have da ba ba. And then another part of me is sort of smiling and saying, okay, so if this is the worst thing that happens to you today, what kind of day is it going to be? And in the grand scope of things, you've got the credit card, the money to buy a new tire without it causing anything in your life. And yet you're tempted to make a big deal of this. If something this small is going to essentially have you lose relationship with your faith because you're falling into your level 3 ego, that should be telling you something of what you need to work on. And then we have big things happen in life. You, brother, have had a lot of things go on in your life. And before we started this morning, just so the audience knows, I was sharing, I've known this man from across the room for 30 years. And what I saw was this unnaturally handsome individual that was unnaturally good at golf, that had this extremely exalted position in mortgage lending, second in command at a major mortgage company, helped build from nothing to something huge, that all changed. And he went away from that company, went to another company, was there for a while, left that company. And he's in this phase of life, which you love me talking about you like you're not here, Stacy. He's in this phase of life where he's had a lot of change relationally, personally, professionally. And so this is a big surprise. And yet I was sharing with Stacy how much I admire his grace, his courage, his faith, his purity, because we've really only known each other closely for a year and a half or 2 years or something out of the 35 years. And he is nothing like my ego was projecting about his ego. Instead, he's really an example in my mind of what more Christians should be. And I'm not judging Christians, but I find too often, not just Christians, of all religions, we tend to create a conceptual relationship with God. There's a large belief system that if I just believe in Jesus, because he said that's enough, and I can go about living my life. The danger to that is that we can go about living our level 3 ego life and really miss the point of what he had to say. In my opinion, it's not enough to just conceptually have acknowledgement and commitment to God or Christ or whoever you do that with. You have to listen to what they said, and you have to practice it at moments where you have surprises that can threaten to upset your sense of peace and with it your faith. And I think, Stacy, you've done an incredible job with that. You're an inspiration to me and others for having done it. What's your perspective on this idea that we have surprises in life that give us an invitation to fear, anger, whatever, and making the choice of operating out of faith, as you've so inspirationally demonstrated in the time that I've finally come to know the real Stacy Harding?
Well, Al, I love our discussion this morning. I think it's going to be pretty impactful for me. I hope it is for everybody that's watching. But I was thinking about when you just said surprises. It's like you, if it's a matter of perspective. If you ask a person, "Do you like surprises?" Somebody's like, "Yeah, I can't. Give me a surprise party, whatever it may be." For me, it's like no surprises. I want none
Right, right.
because I equate surprises with instability. And I was sharing with you, Al, earlier this morning that I've entered this different phase of growth in my life, I believe. And I think I had a period, I had some adversity as a kid with my parents and the situation in my childhood. But from about college until I was late 50s, I was just steady Eddie. I could just, if somebody said, "Well, what's next year going to be like?" I'm like, "I hope it's as good as this one was." I didn't have those year ends where I'm like, "Good riddance to this year. I'm glad it's over." I just didn't have those. And a blessing from above, I suppose, that I hadn't had close relationships and loss of that and all that. But I have had more of that in the last 5 to 6 years, and actually quite a bit. And now my perspective has changed to not anticipate necessarily changes, but expect they're going to happen and be ready to accept that they're going to happen without destroying my inner sense of stability and peace. And, I think Al, you and I both have shared and confessed that we've been kind of worriers our whole life, and we worry about things that almost never come true, but it robs us of peace, right? And that's the level 3 ego. It's not living out of our values based on our trust and faith and our trust in God, because we both share a trust in God. Others may or may not who are watching, but when I come back now, I would be bored with stability now. I truly think
Wow. Huh.
I would feel like, what's the point? And so I need a little adversity because it forces me and challenges me to have faith that I've always talked about my entire life, but I have to demonstrate it, partly because it's the only way I'm going to survive up here. And if I don't, I could go down a dark hole, as we talk about, Al, and do hard things to myself and others. And I just never want my life to be about that, or certainly not my legacy about it. So it brought us back to this idea today: is how do we respond to unexpected occurrences, changes? And anybody that's really being honest with themselves, if they're listening to this discussion, they will admit we don't really control a whole lot in this world. We control our actions, our responses, our attitudes, how we influence others. And so there is some control there. Hopefully, it's not manipulation. But at the end of the day, the surprises are going to come. And what if we were to embrace those as, "Oh man, I'm uncomfortable." And so now I was sharing with you, Al, earlier, I think that I have become comfortable being uncomfortable. And instead of fighting and resisting it, I'm embracing it, saying, "Okay, if I really express faith, I get to watch what God for me above will do with it." And whether it's your belief in the universe and that the universe is naturally good and things turn out as there should, you can have faith about that when you're experiencing these things, instead of having this tragedy of mind and actually all the bad health that comes along with that. And so I don't know if I'm can declare I'm not a worrier anymore, but I'm working on it because I want to just embrace the day and what's going on and look at it as a blessing that whoever I talk to today, whoever I engage with, whatever I see in nature. I love watching the squirrels in my backyard run around. I've shared that before. But to embrace that as, I'm breathing today, I get to experience this instead of being bored with just mundane steadiness. Now, I'm not saying go out and create your own chaos. I'm not saying that. But let's accept it, and let's use our brains that are so powerful to understand this is an opportunity to express my values based soul. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, as you were talking, for whatever odd reason, what came to mind is life is like a river, and we are flowing down this river, and what we seek are the calm places in the river where it's a steady, smooth, beautiful ride. And when that happens, it allows the illusion of control from our ego, because we're not feeling any unsettlement, any volatility. It's all a nice, beautiful flow, and it's easy to flow. But we run into whitewater rapids periodically throughout life. We all do. And very few people deal with whitewater rapids and keep their peace because the ego identifies with a lack of adversity and challenge as being what life should be, when in fact the river has both peaceful phases and whitewater. And so, how do we achieve the ability to keep our peace even in the whitewater? And I think, in my opinion, it is by expanding our perspective beyond the wood chip that we are as an individual physical being, a level 3 ego, to the river itself and seeing the whole scope of the river, upriver, downriver, the delta of ocean that it pours into. And that's something that we're also given the ability to do. And that may well be the purpose of the whitewater, is to shake us out of the complacency of not growing beyond the limitations of our illusory ego self being the entire scope of who we are. I think you've done a beautiful job with that. And I was sharing with you that there's a guy, Ram Dass, some people may know, who is a very famous teacher that was a Harvard psychology professor that became an Eastern guru. And his guru is a guy named Neem Karoli Baba. And he had a very interesting phrase that I've thought about for decades now because it's such an unusual statement. He says, imagine this. He says, I love suffering so much because it brings me so much closer to God. Well, there's great wisdom in that. At first, our ego listens to that and think this guy's a whack job. You know, he needs to eat more and get out of the cave, or whatever that we may think about him. But if you think about the moments in your life when you've had extreme adversity, you were afraid, you were worried, you were depressed, despondent, you felt out of control, and yet you made it through that to be here today to watch this podcast. And that's happened repeatedly throughout your life. And at some point, as we go through enough of those, we may get old enough to ask ourselves, well, is my only choice to go into the panic and giving up on it all in those dark moments? Or can I expand my perspective to a larger scope than the wood chip to the entire river and flow with the river in its nature, however it goes, in the recognition of the fact that divinity, God, whatever you refer to as the source, really has something bigger in mind for all of existence, including me. And therefore, perhaps the reason we are given the human experience in the first place is to face this challenge of growing past a dark response to adversity in favor of expanding perspective, to see there really is no adversity. There are just periods of growth that challenge you to break out of the complacency of stability. And there are periods of stability to give you a time of rest. What do you think?
Yeah, I love that analogy of the river and the rapids and so forth. I was thinking at first about, if we're not careful, if we don't get into the rapids from time to time and get uncomfortable, eventually that river will narrow. It might even stop and become a small lake where you have nowhere to go because your world has shrunk. And I think that's very possible as we age. Watched it with
Mm-hmm.
my family members that have passed and were older, and sometimes physical limitations or mental get you there. But if we can embrace the rapids, understand they move the flow of our lives further down the road and gives us momentum, then I think we can look at it differently. I think maybe, Al, one of the greatest gifts that we could share with people about dealing with that, and you've talked with me about it, I've read about it a lot, is if we can become an observer in those moments instead of a judger. If we can observe what's going on and what can I learn from this and what impact can I take away from this that will grow me spiritually, mentally, relationally, whatever it may be, instead of judging and saying, I hate that I have to do this. This shouldn't be happening. Why? And if we can get beyond that and we can start to observe and say, I wonder what I can learn from this. I wonder what impact I could have in the world by enduring this. There's that New Testament scripture for those who spend some time in there, where James says, consider it pure joy when you experience trials of all kinds. And it wasn't about the trials, it was what he said after. which it creates perseverance and growth and steadfastness and all those things. And I've known of that statement for decades, and I thought, who in the world would consider it joy to experience lots of trials? I'm starting to figure it out, and it's hard to embrace it. It's not like I say a prayer to God, bring on some more trials. I'm not doing that, but it's a different perspective, and as a result of that, I do have greater inner peace. I do have better ability to stay calm in the rapids as it relates to when they come, because they're going to come. And we're crazy if we think they aren't, because they will. And so I think it's an opportunity for people to really be introspective themselves about, think back on some what you might deem crisis that you've experienced in the past. Maybe you're in the middle of one right now, and just think about what your perspective is. Ask yourself, what is my view of this? Am I hating it? Am I wanting out of it as fast as I possibly can? Am I praying to God to remove it from me? Whatever it may be, and just try to observe what you're thinking about. And eventually, I think the calmness that you have inside of you, or God puts inside of us, will arise and give us a chance to look at that with a fresh lens and say, yeah, doesn't mean I have to enjoy it, but I see the point of it and I see what I can take out of it. What do you think, Al?
Yeah, as you were speaking, what occurs to me is there's a school of Buddhism that is focused around the witness. And what this school teaches is you have really two parts to your mind. And I think it was level 3 and level 4. And where we are used to being is in our level 3 active conceptual mind relating to the world, constantly assessing and determining whether it's threatening or not, because it's built into our ego to want to survive. And so we're always kind of got this busy mind going, this monkey mind going. But when you're going through something, you're in high school and that girl you loved, you thought you'd be with forever, breaks up with you to go with the football player. And you're heartbroken, and that monkey mind is thinking, man, I'll never find another one. I worship the ground she walks on. How could she do this? That bitch. Or we get negative to her. I'm not good enough. We negative to us. It's all around judgment and trying to make sense of it to re-stabilize. But while we're going through that, there's a part of your mind over in the corner just watching what you're doing without judgment, to your point. It's just observing and noticing neutrally, oh, Al's freaking out right now over this projection of a lost opportunity for this future with love that he'll never find again. And isn't judging that, just noticing it. And that simple neutral awareness from the witness within us is really our level 4, because it has the larger eternal perspective of this life and everything in it, even over 100 years, much less today, this moment, is just a phase in the river of the section you're on the river to see who's in control within you. Is it your temporal human self that's busy trying to be warm, safe, and dry, cognitively knowing that's only got a time frame? You can only do it for 100 years, if that, and you're gone. I've had people die at 20 and 10 and 15 and 30 and all that, as you have. And so you might live a long life, but okay, so you had more of it. Does that make it better? What makes it sacred to go through is to develop this relationship with the witness that's able to see beyond time, beyond circumstance, beyond space, and beyond ego preferences in favor of the exploration of what's the larger view. And that exploration, it's a little like the metaphor of living on Earth and thinking that this is the center of the universe, and then going out into space and seeing the immensity of it all, where we are just a speck in one tiny galaxy among hundreds of billions of galaxies. It's a matter of scope of perspective. The witness allows an unlimited scope of perspective if you can essentially depersonalize your physical journey as a human being and begin to explore what part of you exists beyond the physical limitations of your identification as Al or Stacy or Fred or Susie. And the more we can develop that, and the way the Buddhists do it in this particular school is they dial it down to breathing, picking up a spoon, tasting the food, putting the spoon down. Seems like it would drive you nuts. But when you do that often enough, it develops this witness of just observing yourself neutrally, because our ego wants to judge everything. And that's what separates us from everything. The moment you lose all judgment, you lose all separation, and you feel a quiet sense of wholeness. But we have to quiet the mind and its conceptual monkey mind enough to experience the purity of peace that comes from being in an infinite space of mind without limitations. Then everybody is your brother, everybody is your sister. You are one with everybody. There's no separation. And that's where we find peace, and I suspect is one attribute of the kingdom of heaven within that we are seeking, that ironically gets accessed by enough drama in our monkey mind and level 3 in circumstances that our witness is brought forth until we recognize, wait a minute, there's a part of me over here that's not freaking out, not out of control, just observing and accepting the flow of the river. So I think it's great wisdom you're sharing here this morning, Stace, that it's important that we shift our perspective. It's what Viktor Frankl learned in the death camps in Man's Search for Meaning. Absolute hell, every day is a threat with death, and yet he came out of it with an inspirational new school of psychology, logotherapy. And he discovered principles that are necessary to kind of practice a life where you can truly have peace and joy. And I think the key is to escape the monkey mind of level 3 and its relative judgments of what is worth going through and what isn't worth going through, because you're really supplanting the larger plan of the source that you have to trust. And trusting the plan is there, even if you're not clear what it is really what faith is about. And therefore why faith is the first step in personal salvation as defined by inner peace forever.
I think these, a couple of key phrases that you used, the witness and the noticer, and it reminded me of a book recommendation that I would give. A lot of people know who Andy Andrews is. He's a former comedian turned author and trainer, and I want to make sure this was his book, but it's called The Noticer. And it is a great book that goes along these lines. I just want to make sure that I've got the right author for this. There it is. Yeah, it's called The Noticer. Sometimes all a person needs is a little perspective. So I recommend that book. It's called The Noticer by Andy Andrews. But I was thinking about this idea of a witness and noticer as you're describing all that, Al, that I think someone could take away from us this morning. We're saying observe yourself. And it can go beyond that. If you can become a noticer where you see things other people aren't seeing, the enrichment of your life, I think, will be large. I was thinking about an event. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Al. When I was first out of college, I went to work for a bank in Topeka, Kansas, and I was going to be a branch manager. And in my second day in training, we got robbed at gunpoint again on the 10th day when I was in charge.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, that's my first 10 days of professional life.
Wow.
So I remember the first one was pretty quiet. The second one wasn't so quiet, and it was a person who was very violent with his language and his threats and all those things. And it was late in the evening, and we were closing the bank around 6 o'clock. And of course, after that happens, not only police come, but the FBI come, and you have to go and give statements. And I learned about a couple of weeks later, after it had all settled down on that second one, that there were 5 of us working there were 3 of us working in the bank and 2 customers plus the robber that came in. And our 5 descriptions of that person were vastly different.
Yeah.
Now, we were under stress, right? There was threats of our lives and all those things. But it occurred to me that I think regardless of whether you're under stress or not, there's that video where there's this group of people that are moving around all of a sudden. You're trying to see what you observe, and in the background is a person dressed up as a monkey walking with a basketball behind him, and people are watching everything else, and they never notice the monkey when you ask them what they saw at the end of that. And so it made me think about just this idea of being a witness or a noticer. If we can open our eyes to what's going on around us, and not just be so busy and in a hurry, that's going to bring joy into our lives, because we're going to see things that people don't see. We're going to see beauty in so many things. We may see some injustices too that might bring some passion into our lives around that. So I just want to encourage people as we're thinking about this today. Um, First of all, try to recognize and notice your own reactions when the surprises come, because they're going to come. Take journals, write down, oh man, when this happened, I felt my blood pressure rising, I felt heat running to my face, and I was angry or I was scared, whatever it may be, and notate those things so that you can understand what your physical and mental reaction is to those unexpected surprises. And a lot of times, Al, as you were describing your tire, uh, it's things like that that can rile us up the most. And so, if we can start to do that, then we will mature, we will grow, we will have more calmness in the rapids. And then expand it beyond that and just see what you can see. If you haven't looked around your neighborhood recently, take a look, take some observation of your neighbors' homes and what kind of flowers have they got in their front yard, and the trees, are the trees ones that really bloom well or they don't. Just take notice of it. You'll experience more of life. I'm trying to do it, that's for sure. But this has been a fun discussion, Al, and I'll let you this time give the last word and we'll wrap up.
Well, as we're having this conversation this morning, what comes to mind is a portal from level 3 to level 4, from the person lost in their reactive mind to the witness. And for me, one of those portals is the use of your core values to remember the option of a larger perspective. If I discover my tires missing under my Toyota this morning and my tapes start running about expense and who did it and da da da, but I ask myself the question, what would faith be thinking right now? It instantly is like foam on a fire and puts the fire out and puts me into a different space of almost humorous consideration of, what are you up to, God? My tire's gone. Why's my tire gone? What am I supposed to learn? But by asking what would faith be thinking right now and answering it, well, it would be assuming that this is a nothing burger, other than it's something that's in my best interest that I don't yet have knowledge as to what that is. But I trust the source and I have faith in my ability to respond to it. I have faith that this doesn't mean I'm going to be living in a box on the street and dying of starvation because I lost a spare tire, as my ego may be tempted to take me down that road. If you ask yourself things like, and typically the opposite of whatever your reaction is. So if my reaction is anger at how could this happen, I might ask myself, well, what is peace? What would peace be thinking right now? What would gratitude be thinking right now? Why might I want to be grateful for my tire being gone? Just the consideration of that, even if you didn't go about exploring to answer the question, puts foam on the fire of your drama. And what we're really here to learn is to get past the constant invitation of dramatic emotional response from our ego in favor of the calm, quiet awareness that it can all be trusted, and everything we see around us, including our neighbor's flowers or missing spare tires under Toyota 4Runners, are all just grist for the mill of awakening to lead us to the conclusion over time that my best option is not to always deal with things in kind as an automatic response to surprises or adversity, but every opportunity of adversity is an opportunity to consider a larger perspective that recasts that adversity from what may be a curse to a blessing. And that often takes time. And that time means that we've got to be in a space, meanwhile, of trusting that it's going to have a positive outcome, and that is faith. So I think the key for folks walking away today is notice the witness in your mind that doesn't have an opinion about what's going on. It's just observing it, and consider your core values: gratitude, love, compassion, faith, humility, truth, whatever they are. And the next time you're dealing with something that's heavy, that's scary, that's dark, a relative gets sick, because you get sick, something, ask yourself what that core value of your soul how it would be looking at the situation. And I promise you, it will change your response to the situation and the situation's meaning itself. I can't think of a time when it didn't convert it over from a curse to a blessing with time. Worst moments of my life, now that I have the scope of my life to look back on, were all critical pieces of growth for me that I resented going through at the time, but my life would not be the scope of blessing that it is today without having gone through it. So I'll let you finish after
Yeah.
that, brother.
Well, I had two thoughts about your tire. Since we started with that, we can end with it. Here's the two thoughts. Because I know you are a conduit for God, and you're a conduit for good. You're a conduit for people in this world. I think there's two potentials of why your tire is gone. The first is it's possible somebody took that tire and maybe they needed it worse than you do, Al.
Nice.
And the second perspective is you have to replace it. And so you have to go talk to somebody about that. Maybe you're supposed to be talking to that person and you otherwise never have met them.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for today. As always, brother, it's great to be back on track. I hope the folks, look, 2025 may be the last year you're here. And that isn't a bad thing. This may be the last day you're here. Don't waste it with your monkey mind. Don't waste it in mere emotional reactivity out of the illusion of control and the premise that it ought to always be predictable and comfortable along the way. I'm really grateful. Stacy and I are grateful you take time to listen to these podcasts because our essential message is that you aren't who you think you are. You're something far more, far greater. And the reason we do these podcasts without really knowing whether anybody even listens to them is in hopes that somebody listens to them and starts to explore who they may be beyond their ego story about who they may be. Because I believe that we will all discover that we aren't really separate when we get into that place. And there isn't really a relative good or bad or whatever. We're just in a place of love. And I believe love is actually how we experience the presence of God in life.
Great.
Blessings to you all today, this month, this year. Brother Stacy, till next time, my friend.
Thank you all for being with us and love you, Al. And we'll look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day, everybody.
Love you too, brother. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.